Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the Human Security at 30 Colloquium, organized and hosted by the United Nations Development Programme's Human Development Report Office. Welcome also to everyone joining us online from around the world. My name is Shakuntala Santharan, Shaks for short, and I'm honored to be moderating today. It is 30 years since the concept of human security was first introduced in the 1994 edition of the Human Development Report to shine a spotlight on the security of people and not just the security of territories. That concept has been expanded since then to include the interdependence among people and between people and the planet. We know that we are now facing some of the biggest human security challenges in decades. Violent conflict is on the rise. There's human-driven planetary change. And then there is the rise of AI, which offers many new opportunities for development, but also poses many new risks. So we need to take stock of how we define, assess, and advance human security. What are the threats? What are the opportunities? What are the new policy frontiers? We will explore that today. Before we begin, here's a quick summary of our program. We have two brilliant panels, and you will get a chance to ask our speakers your questions as well. We'll have a coffee break in between and lunch afterwards that we hope you will stay for. You can get the latest human development reports and the 2022 special report on human security at hdr.undp.org. And now, without further ado, to get us started, please welcome His Excellency Yamazaki Kazuyuki, Permanent Representative of Japan to the United Nations. Ambassador.
Thank you, Shakuntala Santharan. Am I pronouncing correct? But for your introduction. And Excellencies, distinguished guests, first allow me to thank UNDP for organizing this event and inviting me today. And I would like to express Japan's sincere respect for the efforts made all those involved in today's colloquium, including Mr. Pedro Conceição, Director of the UNDP Human Development Report Office. Today, 30 years after the introduction of human security in 1994 by Human Development Report, humanity faces a variety of compounding and intertwined challenges such as poverty, climate change, and the pandemics, and in particular, people's lives, livelihoods, and dignity are being harmed around the world due to more frequent prolonged conflicts. So we consider that the human security is all the more important concept to protect people. On the other hand, the artificial intelligence and other cutting-edge digital technologies have shown the potential to significantly improve people's survival and living conditions, and to dramatically develop human society. Those new technologies can of tremendous use. At this juncture, it is of great significance to consider the roles of human dignity and digital innovation. And in this sense, today's seminar is extremely timely. Today, efforts to achieve the SDGs by 2030 have stalled, with only 17% of the 169 targets set to be on track, and concept of human security is attracting renewed attention. Many projects which adopt the concept of human security take integrated approaches to addressing the multiple SDG goals. The multi-sectoral approach provided by human security is key to accelerating efforts to achieve the SDGs. Unfortunately, we must say it's not advancing quickly. The benefits of digital technology have been found in fields such as health, finance, disaster prevention in both developed and developing countries. Digital innovation can contribute greatly to solving the challenges the humanity and challenges that humanity faces, including for people in the most vulnerable situation in the developing world. For example, in Burkina Faso, JICA, the Japan's aid agency, is currently conducting a project to examine methods to register internally displaced persons through digital technologies and to utilize the disseminate data to support IDPs. In Africa, so-called leapfrogging has led to a dramatic increase in the diffusion of smartphones and rapid spread of digital currencies. With its young and growing population combined with fewer domestic regulations stemming from vested interests, Africa is considered to have a fertile ground for accepting new digital technologies. And there are high expectations for the roles that digital technologies will play in resolving the challenges. However, as you know that the technological advancements are accompanied by various risks. In particular, the development of AI poses new challenges such as creation of surveillance society, invasion of privacy, radical changes in the labor market, cyber attacks, proliferation of disinformation, and other ethical issues, which are indeed direct threats to human security itself. With the rapid development of AI technology, there is an urgent need to establish regulations and guidelines, as well as appropriate frameworks to ensure the AI develops in a manner that is in the best interest of people and in a direction that secures and enhances human security. In this regard, we welcome the adoption of the Global Digital Compact annexed to the Pact for the Future in September this year, which demonstrates our commitment to designing, using, and regulating digital technologies for the benefit of all. In the 30 years since its introduction, human security has evolved to incorporate the concept of solidarity while maintaining its core characteristics of protection and empowerment of individuals. In the future, even in an era of remarkable development in AI, quantum computing and other technologies, human beings will continue to play a central role in human life. The value of human security as a tool to protect human dignity has become even greater in the current challenging international environment. The Japanese government, which values human society as one of the pillars, Japanese government which values the concept of human security as one of the pillars of its foreign policy, will continue its efforts to ensure that the concept is further understood and more broadly shared in the international community. In this endeavor, we welcome the strong complementarity between initiatives and ideas from academia and civil society and efforts at the government level. We hope today's seminar will contribute to strengthening positive dynamics between human security and AI for human development towards solving development issues. I thank you.
Domo arigatou gozaimashita, Yamazaki Daijin. Thank you, Ambassador Yamazaki, for your message and for Japan's continued commitment to human security and development. And now, let's welcome Laura Chinchilla to give us her opening remarks. She is co-chair of the 2025 Human Development Report Advisory Board and the 2022 Special Report on Human Security. She is also the former president of Costa Rica. Laura, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Sandram, for this very energetic way of conducting this event. Good morning, everybody. It is a great pleasure to be part of this important and relevant colloquium. I want to start by thanking to His Excellency Ambassador Kazuyuki. Japan is a country that has decisively advanced human security, and we are very grateful for that. My recognition also goes to Pedro Conceição and the Human Development Report Office for their contributions in further developing this concept. 30 years ago, the 1994 Human Development Report identified key shifts in the traditional state-centered approach to global security and introduced the notion of human security as a people-centered paradigm, embracing a comprehensive approach to security challenges. The essence of this concept was captured in the following phrase from that report. Human security is not a concern with weapons. It is a concern with human life and dignity. While the fundamental principles of the human security framework from 30 years ago remain relevant, the context has become increasingly challenging due to a series of interconnected and unprecedented threats characteristic of the Anthropocene age. These include planetary changes, growing inequalities, digital transformations, and escalating geopolitical conflicts and violence. This is why, in 2022, the Human Development Report Office issued the Special Report on Human Security, aimed at enriching and further expanding the scope of human security. 2 years after the publication of this report, recent developments continue to underscore the challenging conditions for human security worldwide and highlight the urgent need to strengthen the implementation of its principles. By 2023, conflict-related deaths had reached their highest level in 3 decades, driven by the civil war in Ethiopia's Tigray region, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the bombings in Gaza following terrorist attacks in Israel. At the same time, global military expenditure increased for the 9th consecutive year, reaching an all-time high. By May 2024, the number of forcibly displaced people had surged to an unprecedented 120 million. Organized crime has also continued to grow, resulting in more violent deaths and contributing to destabilization in several countries, particularly in my region, Latin America. Meanwhile, global advancements in gender equality have stagnated since 2020, and populations worldwide are increasingly grappling with catastrophic events related to global warming. Today, the world is farther off track in its progress towards the 2030 agenda than it was 5 years ago. Another significant ongoing phenomenon is the exponential emergence of generative artificial intelligence without clear ethical principles and effective regulations, carrying the potential to alter the course of humanity in ways that remain largely unknown to most of us. It is not surprising, therefore, that 6 out of 7 people worldwide feel insecure regardless of whether they live in rich or poor countries. The development with insecurity paradox, highlighted in the Special Report on Human Security, argues that the acceleration of human development in recent years has not automatically led to a greater sense of security. In this context, human security emerges once again as a top priority for local, national, and international policymaking. This is why we are gathered here today, not only to deepen our understanding of human security and the emerging threats it faces, but also to identify blind spots in how we measure well-being and development. Most importantly, we aim to propose new theoretical and practical tools to address all ongoing and further challenges, particularly those stemming from the use and the imminent widespread adoption of artificial intelligence. I am confident that your contributions will help us achieve these objectives. Thank you, and I look forward to an engaging and productive session.
Many thanks, Laura. I look forward to learning more from you during our first panel very shortly. Before that, let's hear from Pedro Canceição, Director of the UNDP's Human Development Report Office. So how are we doing on human security 30 years on? It's all yours, Pedro.
Thank you so much, Shaks. Thank you, Ambassador Yamazaki, President Chinchilla. I think I can be brief because we've heard already the essence of what's bringing us all together today. I just wanted to share a reflection on the fact that when the Human Development Report in '94 was produced, we were living obviously in a very different world. And the key concern at the time was how to harness the peace dividend. And that was one of the motivations to introduce this notion of human security, that security was not only about territorial disputes or military forces, but it was also about what it meant for people. And obviously we are in a very different world today. We just heard from President Chinchilla that we have violent conflict within and across countries at highest levels in decades. But I would argue that the human security concept is even more relevant today. And perhaps more importantly, it's going to be more relevant towards the future. So just to remind us all what human security is about. Human security is a very simple idea. It's the idea that people should be able to live lives free from want, free from fear, and free from living in indignity. And as we look towards a world in geopolitical upheaval, where we have a number of uncertainties associated with things like political polarization, which was the topic of our latest Human Development Report, which I invite you to take a copy of right here on the left, for those that are here in the room. The dangerous planetary changes of the Anthropocene that include climate change, and as we all know, there's a COP now taking place in Baku, where we have expectations about hopefully gaining even more momentum in addressing at least climate change. And also changes in the use and deployment of artificial intelligence that, in our view, are going to reshape prospects for human development with this combination of risks but also huge promise. And that's actually the topic of our forthcoming Human Development Report that we hope to publish by the middle of next year. In conclusion, let me just share three ways in which I think the concept of the human security can be helpful. And I think it can be helpful in many ways, but can be helpful primarily as a lens to look at the world and interpret the challenges that we are confronting. And it can do it in three ways. One is a lens that allows us to see that there are many things happening in the world that are not zero-sum. So many of the disputes that we see around the world, be it military disputes, territorial disputes, economic disputes, assume that everything that frames interactions between states, between societies, is zero-sum, meaning that someone gaining has to be at the expense of others. But there are many things that are not zero-sum. And I think human security allows us to bring this lens to try to identify what those things might be. Secondly, human security is something that is comprehensive. So it allows us to see connections between issues that are very disparate. We can have a huge focus on climate change or on health or on pandemics, but sometimes we miss the interconnections, the linkages between these challenges. And human security is this integrated framework that enables us to find some of these linkages. And then finally, and perhaps the most important thing, is that human security invites us to see the world not as a place where people are passive spectators of the future, but active agents in shaping what's to come. And so hopefully this colloquium will help us to realize ways in which we can actually activate that human agency to transform the world towards a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Here to taking action. Thank you for setting the stage for our conversations and for taking stock of 30 years of human security and what lies ahead. And now to kick off our first panel on the new security and development policy frontiers in the age of artificial intelligence. Here is Dr. Toby Ord, senior researcher at Oxford University. Toby.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, human security is a way of understanding security that centers the individual instead of the state. It focuses on threats to people rather than on threats to nations. As such, it complements the ongoing conversation around national security by addressing the many ways that humans can be vulnerable which don't stem from hostile actions towards the state they live in. Indeed, human security can even involve a person's security from oppression from the very state in which they live. Human security includes economic security, an assured basic livelihood through work or social safety nets, food security, ready physical and economic access to basic food, health security, access to personal health care and protective public health, also environmental security, safety from natural disasters and environmental degradation, personal security, such as safety from violent conflict, domestic violence and crime, community security, safety from oppressive community practices and from ethnic conflict, and also political security, freedom from state oppression and abuses of human rights. This is such a wide range that any attempt to cover them all in a short talk could hardly get beyond platitudes. And in my case, it would also run far beyond my expertise. So I shall leave it to the panel to dig into many of the important dimensions and to see how they're progressing 30 years later. What I shall do is to explore some important new directions and themes for human security that would have been much harder to see 30 years ago, but are now coming to a head. So let's look at how existential risks, future generations, and artificial intelligence could each play major roles in how we think about human security. For the last decade, I've been studying the risk of global catastrophe. In particular, the risks of catastrophes such as a full-scale nuclear war or the worst-case scenarios for climate change, where humanity itself may be unable to recover. Risks like these are known as existential risks, and they're defined as the risk that humanity's long-term potential is permanently destroyed. This could include the risk of human extinction, an unrecoverable collapse of civilization, or any other way that our entire potential could be destroyed. These risks threaten not just the present generation, but humanity's entire future. And that could be a long time. Humanity has existed for more than 200,000 years. That's 10,000 generations. So we've survived 10,000 generations worth of risks from the natural world, providing evidence that the natural rate of existential risk is very low. If we're destroyed, it would likely be by our own technologies. And if so, it would be our own fault. Not just something that happens to us, but something that we brought about. We'd be dropping the baton that's been passed from generation to generation 10,000 times before us. But if we safeguard humanity's potential and last as long as a typical species on Earth, then there would be 40,000 more generations to follow. All existential risks, whether from nuclear war, asteroid impact, climate change, or anything else, share a number of unusual challenges. First, Protection from existential risk is a global public good, so we should expect it to be undersupplied by national governments. For example, the United Kingdom, where I live, contains less than 1% of the world's people. So if its government is primarily concerned with its own citizens, we'd expect them to undervalue existential risks by a factor of 100. And indeed, it's worse than that, because protection from existential risk is an intergenerational global public good. As well as threatening everyone alive today, such risks would threaten all future generations. But the people of those generations have no voice nor representation in our political discussions, so governments focus almost entirely on the present generation and thus undervalue the importance of existential risk by an even greater factor. And perhaps most importantly, we cannot afford to succumb to an existential catastrophe even once across all the thousands of generations to come. And that causes extreme challenges for policymaking. Humanity is good at learning from trial and error, rebuilding after disaster, with a commitment to never let it happen again. But when one error would mean game over, we can't simply muddle through and must take proactive action. And we have to take this proactive action even in the absence of any scientifically established probabilities to go with these risks. But as Carl Sagan memorably put it, theories that involve the end of the world are not amenable to experimental verification, or at least not more than once. This creates serious challenges for evaluating and prioritizing these risks. And it means that we need to make use of advanced forecasting techniques to gain some idea about the odds that we face, or to turn to robust principles for policymaking, such as the precautionary principle, where the onus is shifted to those imposing the risk to show that what they're doing is sufficiently safe. One of the unusual features of existential risks is that they affect not just the current generation, but all succeeding generations. And this permanence, this irreversibility of the harm adds a special weight. The idea that we have a duty to protect these future generations was present even within the opening sentence of the UN Charter. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. And 2 months ago, the General Assembly adopted the Pact for the Future to protect the needs of present and future generations. Its second paragraph explicitly raises existential risks as one of the key threats to address. And this pact also introduced the Declaration on Future Generations, which aims to ensure that present generations act with responsibility towards safeguarding the needs and interests of future generations. In doing so, it reasserts and extends this foundational aim that was present in the Charter. It also raises important questions about how to interpret human security in the context of future generations. For instance, we can think back to the 7 dimensions of human security I mentioned earlier, and how our choices now might bear upon the forms of security for people of the future. And this helps us to see that long-term investments in economic development, medical research, or political rights may foster human security across many generations to come. This is already widely recognized in the case of environmental security, where we can clearly see that some forms of environmental degradation can have effects lasting many thousands of years. This is because there's something precious and yet fragile about the ecosystems and species, such that they can survive some pressure, but once destroyed, that is irreversible. What hasn't been so widely recognized is that the same argument applies to existential risks. There's something extremely precious and fragile about human civilization and humanity itself. In the face of sufficiently large threats, we too would be unable to recover. Indeed, if we were to go extinct, our inability to recover would be total, and all people, all cultures, would be forever lost. One of the great challenges in determining how to fulfill our duties to future generations is in knowing their needs. Indeed, some people feel this makes the project impossible, that the needs of people several generations into the future are unknowable. And surely some of them are. We have rights and needs that people hundreds of years ago would not guess or understand. But if we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and look to the more basic, foundational needs. We find things such as health and food and safety, which are human universals and some of the dimensions of human security. Acting to protect those across the generations is robustly good, providing a foundation to support their higher interests, however unknowable those might be. Suppose we were to look at all the decisions we're making now and to try to assess how future generations would feel about them. If somehow all of these people who may be affected by our choices today were able to have a voice over them, how would they use it? What decisions would they most want to affect? Again, much of this is unknowable. But there would be certain systematic patterns. For example, the people of the next 4 generations would have a unified interest in protecting against environmental degradation that lasted for 100 years, affecting all of them. And when it comes to choices that would raise or lower existential risks, people of every future generation would have a strong interest in acting to reduce those risks. Because these decisions affect the foundational needs of every future generation, I think they're places where the combined voice of future generations would speak the loudest, if only it could. In my view, this makes avoiding imposing existential risk one of the most important parts of any attempt to protect the needs and interests of future generations. Given the magnitudes of the risks that we face, existential risk should be a key global priority today, even just in terms of the needs and interests of those alive today. But an awareness of our duties to future generations strengthens this case even more, and the Declaration on Future Generations may provide a strong normative basis for multilateral action. And now we come to artificial intelligence. AI is a general-purpose technology that will come to impact many different facets of human security, from employment to state oppression to greater prosperity to improved healthcare. But the thread I want to focus on is the possibility that it poses an existential threat to humanity. Whether it poses such a risk is currently the subject of vigorous debate. But it's clear that many of the leading thinkers in AI believe this possibility is serious enough to make existential risk from AI one of the major global priorities of our time. Last year, 600 AI experts and public figures signed a short statement in an attempt to spell this out as clearly as possible. Mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war, is what they said. This statement was signed by many of the foremost academics in AI, including 2 of the 3 people who won the Turing Award for developing deep learning, which powers modern AI systems. Indeed, they've both given heartbreaking speeches about how they now realize that their life's work, which they were so proud of, might have catastrophic consequences for humanity, leading them to devote the rest of their lives to trying to mitigate those harms. The statement was also signed by many of the major players in industry, including the CEOs of the 3 leading AI labs, admitting that the technology that they're helping to build may have devastating consequences for all the people of the world and all future generations. And it isn't just people in technology who are sounding the alarm. Nelson Mandela's group of former world leaders, the Elders, put out their own statement, saying, "Without proper global regulation, the extraordinary rate of technological progress with AI poses an existential threat to humanity. This threat requires a truly effective multilateral response." Far from the usual tech voices, this was signed by Ban Ki-moon and former national presidents from across the world: Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, South America. Even the Secretary General has called out AI as potentially posing an existential risk. He said, "We still face the nuclear danger, and we're dealing with 2 more threats with existential dimensions: the climate crisis and the risks of uncontrolled artificial intelligence." I want to be clear that today's systems don't pose such risks. The concern is that with the current rate of progress, that AI systems might soon be capable enough to pose an existential risk, and we're not remotely ready. While there remains disagreement about whether such risks will eventuate, this doesn't mean that policymakers are free to ignore this possibility or to do nothing until this disagreement is resolved, which it never will be. Scientists, technologists, and world leaders have united to make statements of uncommon clarity and urgency. It's rare to ever get as clear a warning as this. Given what is at stake for all the citizens of the world and all those to come, the wise course of action is clearly to at least take seriously the possibility that the risks are real and to prepare to take actions commensurate with the gravity of the situation. Even for states that aren't at the forefront of AI development, there are actions they can take to protect their citizens. I've seen a narrative emerge that concern about these risks is just another way for the richest states to back out of their commitments to share the fruits of technology with the world. And no doubt there is some truth to that. But there's a second way of looking at it that I think holds a deeper truth. The countries that develop a powerful new technology will likely capture an unequal share of its benefits. But when that technology poses an existential risk, this terrible downside is imposed equally on all people of the world, even those who received only a small share of the benefits. Remarkably, some of the individuals, companies, and countries who are developing advanced AI are coming to the global conversation and suggesting new multilateral institutions or treaties to bind their own hands and to reduce those risks. Far from a distraction, I think this represents an excellent opportunity for the majority of states in the world to hold those who are imposing these risks to account and to protect their own citizens from these external risks. When it comes to existential risk, there will be no opportunity for restorative justice. So seizing this chance to help shape the governance of AI is paramount. So those are my thoughts on some of the key frontiers of human security for the next 30 years on. Existential risks, future generations, and AI. But there's so much more to be said, and I can't wait to hear the thoughts from the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Very sobering, thought-provoking address there. We do need to be working together, young and old, to tackle these threats. So please now also join us back on stage, Laura, and also Turhan Saleh, who is Deputy Director of the UNDP's Crisis Bureau. Please come on up. And Daniela Darlington, she is co-founder and team lead at Elena, an AI governance platform and consultancy. She's an affiliate at All Tech is Human as well, which aims to grow the responsible tech field. I'm going to sit right there, so please, yes, thank you. Daniela is also an advisory board member of the International Telecommunications Union. And please join us, Kezo Masali, Head of Digital Programming at the UNDP Chief Digital Office. Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to be here with us today. I'm going to spread this out a little bit, maybe. Do we need a bit more space, maybe? We can spread out a little bit.
That's a good idea.
Get comfy. So let's look at the emerging opportunities and some of the policy challenges for human security in the age of AI. Laura, you are a global expert in human security and citizen security. You've done a lot of work on crime and organized crime. So how do you see AI affecting, changing this landscape?
Well, thank you again for being so passionate about listening to me again. But I will try to summarize some of my concerns in this complex equation of about criminality, criminal violence, and artificial intelligence. But I would like to start saying something more general about the debate on artificial intelligence, and that is that sometimes these kind of debates have been very narrowly framed. That is my impression, as ones that can be resolved by weighing its pros and cons, the pros and cons of the technology, or in a more conventional terms, but maximizing opportunities while managing risks. I think that this approach is insufficient, but also risky, because artificial intelligence systems based on machine learning are not merely digital tools like the ones we have used before, but agents capable of performing tasks and making decisions autonomously. So some examples of the, and that is why I welcome this discussion, this activity that we are organizing here today. But when we come to the risk that artificial intelligence has concerning organized crime and criminal violence, we can have very clear examples of how risky this technology can be. And let me just give you some examples. For example, one of the examples is using AI-generated images and fake voices to commit fraud and extortions, and AI automated calls to expand the chances of financial scams. Very recently, Interpol warned that we are facing an epidemic in the growth of financial fraud, and that with the development of artificial intelligence and cryptocurrencies, the situation is only going to get worse without urgent action. But also with regards to cyber crime operations, criminal organizations are using AI to automate hacking processes, develop sophisticated malware, and executing phishing attacks. Another piece of information tells us that since the launch of ChatGPT, phishing emails have surged over 4,000%. So this is really huge. And one of the most serious concerns regarding AI systems' potential to exacerbate the worst crimes like child sexual exploitation by facilitating online grooming with automated interaction is something that is already happening. It is facilitating predators to engage with children through social media and online platforms. AI can also facilitate the analysis of data from social media to identify vulnerable victims, children, based on their online behavior, interests, and interactions, so allowing predators to target potential victims more effectively. So in general, AI tools can help facilitate communication and transactions on the dark web where criminal activities often occur. So to finalize, some of you can argue, and that is my concern about this kind of debates, that on the other hand, law enforcement agencies can also use more effectively these tools to tackle organized crime. But again, if that is the analysis we are going to implement, probably we won't be able to, to stop the most malign effects of the use of AI in these kind of issues, because when you analyze what is happening is that there is a huge imbalances in the access to this technology from the criminal organization as compared with the law enforcement organizations.
So many risks.
Many risks.
Right? What should, is that not working? What should policymakers focus on first?
This is working, okay. I think there are like 3 areas where policymakers should work. One has to do, and that is also a general approach to confront the risk coming from artificial intelligence, and that is in trying to adopt more rigorous ethical standards and more effective regulations. Now, having said this, we have to recognize that this is lacking in most of the countries. The only positive experience, and it doesn't mean that I will endorse every word of that legislation, but we have to recognize that the European Union has already adopted an important piece of legislation. So we should use this as an example to bring those recommendations to other nations. But one of the problems I also want to bring here is that from the point of view of small, medium-sized nations in the global south, it is very hard to expect those nations to have the muscle as to pass this kind of legislation, because we at the same time are confronting very powerful companies which are developing and using digital technologies. So in that sense, my advice will be also to come together through multilateral mechanisms so we can be able to move forward in this direction. The second one has to do with enhanced detection tools, how to invest more proactively in artificial intelligence tools in favor of the government institutions and law enforcement agencies. And finally, also kind of general recommendation, not only concerning organized crimes, and that is that in certain way, societies has also the obligation not only to think about what kind of artificial intelligence we need for the future, but what kind of human beings we need to prepare to confront this kind of challenges. So that is why the concept of human security is very important, because one of the recommendations coming from the human security approach is to try to have human beings with more agency so they can be able to have the right tools, the capabilities to confront this kind of risk. So that means, and that's my last words, that I am not pretending to put all the duties on the technological side, but also we need to do more in terms of investing in the right education and the right social policies in order to strengthen not only the artificial intelligence, but the human intelligence and human capabilities.
Bravo. Thank you, Laura. So policymakers certainly have their work cut out for them. They have to look at these emerging policy frontiers, including with AI, and they also have to take care of old, existing human security challenges. So Turhan, how do policymakers strike a balance here? Do they need to be very nimble and adaptable?
Thank you very much, Jax. Let me just start by saying, I think it's working. Let me start by saying that it is a very good time to be reflecting on human security in the 21st century. Of course, we've all noted that the context has changed dramatically from the period 30 years ago, when, as Pedro pointed out, we faced very different circumstances. One of the things that I'd like to stress, and we are all in different ways, Toby just mentioned it, we are facing probably the most fundamental transitions or transformations in the modern era, in the world today. Multiple transitions. We see climate, we see demography, we see technology. Technology is one of them, and AI is at the heart of it in many ways in terms of its implications. Now, in a sense, if you talk about, human security in the 1990s and you look at human security in the 21st century, you say, for policymakers, the question would be, well, how do we connect the two? What do we do about them? What makes sense as a policymaker for me to think about in order to have a coherent, effective response, commensurate response? Well, one line of inquiry we are following in UNDP, it's one line of inquiry, is we are zeroing in on the concept of risk. Now, you might say, well, yeah, what's new about risk? It's always there. What we are saying is these fundamental transformations or transitions are completely changing the risk environment. This is qualitatively a whole different ballgame. It's a different ballgame in terms of scale. It's a different ballgame in terms of scope. It's different in terms of the speed at which we've just experienced a pandemic which spread at an incredibly fast rate. Connectedness, none of us are secure anywhere in the world. And the consequences of it, which are widespread. So in this view, the argument we are making, and picks up on what Toby was saying, is that we need to start looking at risk at societal level. We now have many efforts where a central bank looks at macroeconomic risk. A national disaster management agency looks at natural disaster risk. The interior ministry in a country, the average one, will look at political security threats. Looking at them separately will not work. We have to see the connections between them, and we have to start addressing it now as a core public policy priority. Governments say, we want to grow by 6%. We want to reduce inflation. We want to improve access to some service or the other. We want to transform our economy. This is at that level, if not a bigger priority for public policy, risk management. That's the argument we're making. And we are also going to make the argument, a report will be coming out soon, that risk reduction should be seen as a public good. It is a public good, and we need to invest in it. And if we do not, the provisioning of the reduction of risk will be under-provided. And what the consequences will be, we'll slow down development progress, we might stagnate on development progress, and reversals are very, very possible. The price will be very hard. Let me end by just mentioning one other thing, which is inspired by the concept of human security. How would we start interpreting it in the 21st century, given our changed conditions? Let me very quickly put to you a number of items. Some you're familiar with, some may ring a little bit differently. Command of the vital assets for a meaningful life: health, education, learning, and income. Second, life in a healthy, enabling, and sustainable natural environment. Third, negative freedom. We've talked a lot about negative freedom here. Freedom from violence, insecurity, violation of universal agreed human rights. But let's also put emphasis on positive freedom. Freedom to identity, to dignified employment, to civic and political participation, to voice in a society, not to be excluded. And another element is faith in the social contract, and this is becoming a fundamental issue. The acceptance by members of a society that the outcomes we see in society, including the disparities that we see in society, whether income or intergenerational or whatever you might see, that they reflect fair rules of the game and they are fairly applied. Final two items: solidarity, our ability to come together individually and collectively to deal with shared concerns. And final point, sense of stability, protection from stresses and shocks, and access to means of recovery to try to reduce the uncertainty and the consequences of the uncertainty on the lives of people. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Turhan. So those are some of the policy challenges and what to do about it. What about opportunities with AI? Are there AI solutions that can directly enhance human security, for example, to deal with responding to crises better?
Two quick preambular points. One is it's still pretty early days with AI, so we've got a long way to go, so that already tells you something. The second thing is, I think, and I'm not trying to be Cassandra, the costs of AI are quite clear already. They're very visible. But the benefits are still somewhat hypothetical. They could lead to this, could lead to that. And President Chinchilla mentioned that. Let's be very clear. The benefits are highly unlikely to be distributed equitably across social groups, across countries, across regions of the world. So on that note, let's be positive. It is, for example, we are working in UNDP on predictive analysis on crisis prevention. This is a major task. We talk a lot about prevention. It's an incredibly important issue. We've missed a lot of opportunities in the past to do this. But now maybe with the capabilities present in AI, we will be able to do a better job of doing predictive analysis to understand a little bit, much better actually, what are the chances and likelihood of something going wrong in a certain context from a variety of sources. A second example is climate science and its implications, and modeling at a societal level what would be the implications of some of the things we are seeing with climate change. We really need to understand that a lot better, impact on demography, on economy, on livelihoods, and so on. So these are some of the things I would bring up. Thanks.
Thanks, Johan. Now, Daniela, you are a responsible AI advocate, innovator, and entrepreneur. You're working to bring responsible AI practices to the African continent. So, what possibilities do you see for AI in human security? We heard Johan say that the benefits are still hypothetical. What say you?
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'd like to say that human security is about thriving in our interconnected world, whether physical or digital, and ensuring that everyone is able to live a life free of fear, anxiety, want, and all. In terms of AI, I believe artificial intelligence holds a transformative power to impact and prioritize human security in key areas, but I'd like to classify them into three areas. First is empowerment, the other would be protection, then the other would be privacy. So in terms of empowerment, AI can enhance access to essential resources and help us to bridge systemic gaps. As Tohan rightly mentioned, we realize that the distribution is not like equally, AI is here to stay. However, it's not evenly distributed. And there are still people within specific areas that are still lacking like basic essential resources such as access to healthcare, financial, technology services, among others. This is where I see an opportunity for us to capitalize on the strengths of AI to really help bridge these kind of systemic gap. So for example, in Ghana, there are AI companies that are actually innovating within the agriculture sector where they are helping farmers to be able to have access to market data, real-time market data, help them to also preserve their crops and also increase their crop yield through regenerative agricultural practices, among others. And these are like startup companies and businesses that are leveraging AI to bridge some of these gaps. The other aspect would be protection. I think safeguarding fundamental human rights is very crucial, especially within the context of human security and also in the digital space, where we have a lot of people interacting with technologies from time to time. We are also at a risk where our basic human rights and freedoms could be challenged, or yes, could probably be challenged. So I believe we can use AI technologies to address some of these problems and also strengthen like digital infrastructures against cyber crimes, cyber bullies, among others. But we have to also notice that protection must always be paired with vigilance to prevent the misuse of AI, especially with technologies that are being used for mass surveillance and also populating the misinformation, which eventually would erode trust and also like exacerbate fear in even young people who use digital technologies or interact with AI solutions. The next point would be privacy. So one crucial topic that comes to bear with regards to the potential of AI revolutionizing our life is the topic of privacy, because AI feeds a lot on data, and I'm sure most of us here have, in one way or the other, interacted with an AI technology where either you probably used it for your work or your personal activities, and you probably have input some confidential information. Think about it like our smart homes these days. You have a smart kettle where you can even boil your hot coffee in the morning, or you have your Siri where you tell it and give it instructions, your to-do list. In one way or the other, it's taking our data, and this is more like opaque data. You don't really know how it's using your data or information, but somewhere on the other end, there are technology companies that are having insight to these data and knowing, and they can actually infer what your daily activities are, what your routines are, among others. So then privacy becomes very crucial when we are trying to govern the space of artificial intelligence. So I think it's important that we not only educate people around the use of AI technologies, but also let them understand that they have the opportunity to also create their own guidelines in terms of how much they share, how much information they share into these AI technologies, and also have the right to either opt in or opt out in some of these AI tools that are actually being leveraged to train your own data, among others. So yeah, it is very important that we inculcate trust and also address these like gaps when we are like leveraging these AI technologies to solve our problems on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
How do you think, Daniela, the public and private sectors can work together to build this trust, to move things in the right direction?
Yes, so for the most part, we always say that the public sector creates the framework and the private sector drives the innovation. But one thing that we tend to forget is that if there's going to be any critical shift within the AI governance space, it always starts with the public sector, in the sense that we should not necessarily just focus on governance by AI, but we should also focus on governance with AI. So as Madam President was saying, that with the emergence of these technologies, there's also the need for us to educate the workforce as to how to leverage these technologies and also understand the potential risks and also mitigate all these risks. So what I would say is that for the public sector, we should increase education within the public level. For the public staff, we have to educate them about these AI technologies so that they can have better understanding of what policies needs to be adopted or needs to be created. Also, when we are addressing the existential risks or even the current risks that we are facing with AI, I think it's important that we have granular frameworks specifically focused on industry-specific risks and problems, and not create like a broad scope AI policy in that angle. And for the private sector, I believe it's very important for us to have collaboration amongst both the private and the public sector, in the sense that we need civil societies on board, because they are the ones who are going to be doing the groundwork, engaging with the end user, creating more literacy, making them understand what the technology is and how it impacts their life, and even how they can address potential harms that come up with it. We also have to also engage the software developers, the researchers, academia, among others. And there has to be like investments within this space. We have to have a dedicated fund towards human security, focused on emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and how it impacts our lives. So I think it's very important that we have this kind of collaborative approach to solving this problem.
Thank you, Daniela. Kejom, do you want to add to that? How important are partnerships in using AI to advance human security?
Absolutely. As Daniela was speaking, I was just thinking about last week when UNDP, along with the G7 and a delegation of African startups and private sector leaders, were in San Francisco. And the objective really was to facilitate that public-private partnership that transcends borders, just like artificial intelligence. And what we ended up doing was having uncommon conversations and, I would say, positive confrontations. Because what we are hearing from this panel and the speakers that have spoken before us, especially when we put AI in the context of human security, it cannot be business as usual. So I think there's a huge opportunity for public-private partnership. If we sort of look at the current trajectory of where the investments in artificial intelligence are going, by 2028, it's about 600 billion AI-related investments that will happen across the world, but only a fraction of it is going to go towards developing countries and or for the solutions that Turhan mentioned that we need for sustainable development. Similarly, we know that AI is projected to add, and I'm giving you some positive stats with a little bit of a twist, $13 trillion to the economy by 2030, but only 10% of it will benefit developing countries. So in that context, I think these trends also give some structure around the systemic vulnerabilities and the AI equity gaps that are starting to emerge, as well as the responsibility gap. If we look at the current AI responsible AI index, developing countries are largely scoring on an average 20 out of 100 compared to the rest of the non-developing countries. And so we have a huge task at hand in terms of really looking at the AI equity and responsibility gap that's starting to emerge. Now, I loved what Pedro said about human agency. At the heart of this discussion is not how technologies will shape our future, but how people around the world will shape the future of artificial intelligence. So the conversations in San Francisco were again around how do we really put people back at the center of these technologies? And to do that will require these very strong public-private partnerships.
Thank you, Kezom. Now, you're a digital expert, among other things. So when we attempt to leverage AI for development, that could come with trade-offs. We keep hearing about the concerns about privacy, right, data privacy, and misuse. So how do we maximize the benefits while safeguarding against these threats? Is it possible?
Absolutely, it's possible. I mean, that's why we are here today, and thank you so much to our Human Development Report Office and Pedro's leadership for convening us with such an esteemed multi-stakeholder gathering today. Look, when at the beginning of this year, UNDP has taken some very intentional and deliberate steps to protect the opportunity of artificial intelligence for sustainable development. And as we scanned across developing countries, engaged with the public and private sector globally, we realized that there are 4 critical gaps or foundational gaps that we need to address in local AI ecosystems. Now, as a field-based agency, our role is not around global governance, but rather on what matters at the country level so that we can support countries in their development pathways, as Turhan mentioned, mitigate the risk and be much more proactive about the new kinds of risk emerging. And we see that there are 4 key areas that we really need to look at in a much more systematic way, and we're starting to do that as the United Nations Development Program, but also working with a coalition of locally based, continentally based actors. And these 4 areas are compute. If you look at, compute is expensive. Compute has a critical nexus also with energy. And so, there are many unanswered questions still around compute. But if we just look at the data that's starting to emerge as we work with our partners across developing countries, in Africa, only 5% of the AI innovators have access to the compute that they need. That's huge. And the implications for innovations for sustainable development is huge. For an African innovator or entrepreneur, you can iterate on your solution, on the models every 6 days compared to an entrepreneur in a G7 country that can iterate on your model every 30 minutes. So you can see how much that compute accessibility and affordability is going to stifle the innovations that we require for human development, human security. Second, on data. We just launched a pilot which we call Learning by Doing, because there are many unanswered questions, and UNDP as the integrator on the ground really is best positioned when we collect people together, as we are doing today, to build the answers collectively. But in data and in local languages, there are so many low-resource languages, and it's going to take huge investments to digitize them so that we may remove the biases in AI models and systems. But to do that, we need to ensure appropriate community stewardship, appropriate remuneration. Daniela spoke about data and where does my data go, who does it belong to? And we need to ensure appropriate public infrastructure, public good that needs to be generated because data, language data on crisis, on health, on public services delivery, that has huge implications across the entire spectrum of development pathways that countries can make progress on. The third is talent. As we just heard, compute accessibility can stifle innovations and talent. And talent is necessary in order to ensure that developing countries can be equal participants in not just using AI, but also in shaping the future of AI to make it much more responsible and much more in service of humanity. And then the last bit is around local ecosystems, trust and safety. And it was interesting in San Francisco when we had a lot of the discussions around putting people at the center of AI, we realized that, the traditional trust and safety models of private sector is very risk, reactive. Whereas what we need to move towards is that as there are grievances or challenges in very diverse contexts, we need to ensure that trust and safety models are much more collaborative and need to be reimagined. So these are the 4 areas where much work needs to be done. And we think that, human security, not solving these will lead to more human security. But we have an opportunity to mitigate that and challenge ourselves to do more today.
The time is now.
The time is now.
So with the right safeguards, AI can be used to boost human security. So Toby, we heard in your keynote address, you are researching the long-term future of humanity and existential threats, including AI. What do you think policymakers can do to lay the groundwork for long-term sustainability and resilience?
Yeah, thank you. So far, when people do address, policymakers address existential risks, such as the risk from nuclear war and also the risk with climate change, it's been quite piecemeal. So one of these new threats will arrive, and then over decades, we will slowly come to terms with how serious it is. In the case of nuclear weapons, it was about 40 years before the public really kind of got it, and there were widespread demonstrations on the streets about the danger of nuclear weapons. With climate change, there's a similar kind of period of time, up until the school strikes and this kind of really, really getting it. And I don't think that this kind of piecemeal approach of identify a risk, and then wait for a generation or two, and then everyone finally cares enough about the risk that the policymakers need to act on that. I don't think that strategy is a winning strategy long term, and I think that having this concept of existential risks is quite useful, and that we may need something more like a treaty on existential risk. Some kind of coming together, perhaps through the United Nations would be a natural location, to say that the imposition of these risks is unacceptable, is kind of deeply unacceptable. In some ways, it's possible that the crimes against humanity law international law would apply on this. If posing a risk of killing everyone in the world and destroying humanity is not a crime against humanity, that would be surprising. So kind of levering some of these existing things and then perhaps kind of solidifying it under some new treaty could be a way to deal with that, whereby it's then understood that if a new technology is developed, we're not just always fighting fires kind of after they break out, but rather, we're moving from this kind of piecemeal fighting of fires to developing the kind of building codes and fire codes to make sure that we don't pose these risks, and that if a country develops some new technology which the expert community thinks there's a high chance of posing an existential risk, then that it would naturally come under this umbrella in this process, and the nations would have to come together and talk about it, rather than that by default it just happens.
Yeah, when it's too late to do anything about it. thank you all. Now, I have a question for all of you. So we've been focusing mainly on AI as a driver of change. What else? What other advancements do you think will be critical in shaping the future of human security? Lara, if we could start with you, please.
Well, I will probably add more concerns to our conversation because I think we have covered many of them, but there are still others that, as you know, as a former political leader, I am very concerned about two additional situations. One is the erosion of public debate, the erosion of trust among us, between the people with the institutions, and the lack of common ground to discuss some relevant issues. And that has to do also with the role of AI, since now there is the possibility to use AI for deep fakes. It's going to be even harder to make the case in favor of a more objective, well-balanced public debate. And so that is another concern, because if we don't have some minimal common grounds, it is going to be harder to move forward in designing the right strategies that we will need to tackle this problem. The other one is, it is true that, it is critical to confront this issue, to have a private-public partnership. But what I can see today, coming mostly from leaders on the private and the political sector, is not an intelligence convergence, but a kind of convergence that creates many doubts about what are the ultimate objectives. Because at the same time, some of those leaders are undermining the most important institutions that I think are those who can really put forward this agenda, and that is the multilateral system. Instead of strengthening the conversation at the multilateral level, they are establishing individual alliances. And, so in my case, I have many doubts about what the final results will be. Are they really trying to come together to improve people's lives, or are they trying just to, just to favor one side of the discussion? And probably that would be the worst, which is a combination of more power in the hands of corporations, the technological corporations, and on the other side, more power to autocratic kind of governments. That will be the worst combination.
Great questions you've posed there, and in my humble opinion, we should be having more honest conversations about just that. Tohan, your thoughts?
Yeah. 3 quick points. One, I think we've really got to deal with the issue of private profit versus public good. And a lot of the progress is being driven by the profit motivation. There's nothing wrong with that. But we really need to balance it with concerns for the public good. The second thing is, and I want to stress something that Pedro brought up, and that Kaesong emphasized as well, is the issue of agency. As we are faced with this risk, and the Human Development Report has mentioned this, we are faced with the possibility also of paralysis in what to do. And the argument is, this is actually a call to agency, to do something about it. And the question is, how can AI help with agency? There are some concerns I have to add to the list of concerns. They're long ones. Organized crime and the role of bad actors using AI. Many societies are choking, political systems are choking on information pollution generated partly by AI. The third thing is autonomous warfare. We haven't talked about it. Autonomous warfare is an incredible danger out there. And I'll just add one more, and this is really concerning, and this goes to the profit motive issue. We now have a large global marketplace for your private information. It's unregulated, mostly. European Union is trying. Some other countries are trying. but is a huge global marketplace where your personal information, everything you do in your life online, is available for sale and being used. What are we going to do about it? Something needs to happen. Thanks.
Hear, hear. Daniela, your thoughts, please.
So I would say that in order for us to tackle some of these concerns, we should actually come up with preconditions that whether we are leveraging AI or not, there should be no harmful effects on humans. And so this involves also bringing in place liabilities, whether it is for the developers that are creating some of these softwares. I think some people may come after me, but even for VCs investing in startup companies, I know most of the time we are up for growing fast at the expense of addressing some of these risks. So there should be some liabilities that they incur when they end up having like startup companies building AI solutions that eventually would be catastrophic for humanity. The other bit would be the fact that advocacy is very important. I think I was having a conversation with Divan earlier, and we were talking about the fact that the AI space is constantly changing, and the policy that we would probably create today might be outdated the next day. So how do we keep up with this ever-evolving space? It's important that we actually train people within, like I mentioned, the public sector, also the private sector, who would be experts in the field to be able to keep up with the ever-evolving space. Also, one thing I would want to add would be creating more of like a technology assessment indicators or indicators where we can actually know for businesses, know whether you are actually innovating in a responsible manner or not. There has to be specific indicators. So for my company, if I am innovating within the customer service space and someone is leveraging a customer chatbot, for example, to interact with an AI bot and there are like some outcomes that were not intended, we should know that this is something that is falling outside the scope of responsible AI indicators. So if we have some of these frameworks or indicators for us businesses to innovate around and imbibe like ethical and responsible AI innovation within the life cycle of our development, from risk assessment to impact assessment, it will be very helpful for us to tackle the problems at the grassroots. So that's what I think it's important for us to also take home.
Kezo, what do you think?
I was just thinking of our story, Pedro. Long before Pedro took this role, he played a major role in stopping the Ebola crisis in West Africa. And it was because we were working together to use technology to pay the health workers the right risk payments on time. And before we came in to really put people at the center of technology, of course, technology was present in various parts of West Africa. So the principles with which you design and implement specific solutions and collaborate across, social protection ministry to health ministry to central bank and mobile money payments. I think the heart of the opportunity and the action really is for us to spend much more time doing and learning, and I think that's a moral imperative, an economic imperative, and a responsibility for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Toby, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I've got an optimistic one. There's an emerging technology called metagenomic sequencing that I think has a lot of promise. We don't quite yet know if it will all pan out, but the idea is that that there are techniques for taking a sample, for example, a sample from a patient, if a doctor doesn't know what's wrong with them, and sequencing all DNA and RNA sequences that are in that sample. And so this has a lot of potential just regular benefit for finding out exactly what virus or bacteria is infecting the person. But also for detecting very quickly emerging pandemics because it could, for example, if this technology had been used in the early period with COVID, it would very quickly have detected that there is something that is a novel virus that's present, whose most similar thing is SARS, but that has substantial differences from it, such that it can't be a simple kind of mutation from SARS. And that would have been, extremely useful to know immediately. And this technology could also be applied in sewage systems in order to find out for a whole town, or city, and also in ports like airports in order to work out if things are spreading by sampling from the air conditioning systems. So that's a technology that I'm very hopeful that it will pan out, and that it really could change the way that infectious disease is dealt with in the world, both at a personal primary care level and also at this global public health level.
So much potential for technology to do good. Now, it is your turn to ask our experts questions. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. But first, soon, we have a question from Joanna Bryson. She is Professor of Ethics and Technology at the Hertie School in Germany. She sent us this question on video in advance. Let's listen to her.
Hi, my name is Joanna Bryson. I'm Professor of Ethics and Technology at the Hertie School, and it's my honor to be invited to introduce this panel and to ask the first question. So the panel is, here we go, Human Security at 30. New policy frontiers in the age of artificial intelligence. And the question I want to ask the panel is a question I've been thinking about for decades. And I hope you can get further on it than I have. So, given that we have artificial intelligence, how can we use it to empower ourselves? Is there something we can do in terms of surveillance where we can give ourselves more security, but at the same time not eliminate our freedoms? So the most essential part of privacy is that we can invent ourselves, right? We need to be able to experiment, to change our mind, to change our identity, to become a new person with a new political goal. So we need to be able to cheat, right? We need to be able to protest. So is it possible to do this in technology, or do we need to eliminate the means by which we're surveilled? Thank you.
Did everyone hear that?
Hi, my name is Joanna Bryson.
In case you didn't hear it. So Joanna has been thinking about this question for decades. You have just minutes to answer it. Who'd like to take this first? Turhan, thoughts? You're up.
No.
You're in the hot seat.
I'm in the hot seat. No, just to say, I think it's too late to roll back surveillance. The question now is what we're going to do about it. And I think civic action is extremely important, mobilizing. And let's talk a little bit about how analog can help on the digital. I think people just getting together, voting, demanding questions, posing questions to their representatives, mobilizing at different levels, grassroots all the way up. I think we need to wake up, we need to organize, we need to mobilize, we need to understand, we need to take, oh God, sounds like a political speech. And we need to make our voices heard about the dangers that are out there. I think that's critical in order to deal with the challenge. But I think the genie's out of the bottle. Yeah.
Anyone else? Toby?
Yeah, so for some of these things, there are some ideas from computer science that may be able to help, where with an idea called structured transparency. And so the idea there is that when surveillance happens and generates data on individuals, that to have information systems be able to appropriately protect that data, and with kind of mathematical proofs that have been written on this, to only provide it in certain ways. So, for example, to make sure that 3 keys, held by different people are all needed. So perhaps there are, 12 information commissioners who, say for the police force, have access to these keys, but 3 of them are needed in order to look at someone's record. And so there are a whole lot of possibilities for things like that, or majority control and so on. To avoid these kinds of possibilities where just some small number of people, are looking at these things, and that itself is kept secret. And similarly, you can have systems that leave kind of indelible marks that say which keys were used at which time in order to look at the records, and keep a history of that on the records as well in order to avoid abuses. So I think that there is some hope for I mean, people would have to demand these things to be done. But I think that a lot of existing systems could actually be transformed. Perhaps if things like, say the EU were to demand these types of things to be done by people holding data, we might be able to have a world where people knew if their data had been accessed, and that they were always notified by that, or could always check, and that it could only be accessed in appropriate ways.
Did you want to add to that, Kezum?
I was thinking of something called a prisoner's dilemma, which many of you will be familiar with. And in this AI race, as we work to bend the arc towards a much more equitable and responsible AI ecosystem in countries and globally, at the moment what we have is a prisoner's dilemma where organizations that are able to sort of release their innovations and models faster compared to, say, the more responsible actors who may delay it because certain kind of safeguards and guardrails are not in place, these actors are actually being rewarded. So I'm just wondering, how do we as a sort of, set of stakeholders kind of create a new ecosystem? And I'm not at all saying we need more regulations, because we do have to balance regulations with innovations. Each country journey on that pathway is quite unique and different. So I think overcoming the prisoner's dilemma in this race and being more responsible, affordable, efficient, impactful, sexy is going to be, I think, the future.
Thank you. If no one else wants to add to that, let's open the floor now to more questions. The lady over there, you had your hand up very quickly. Can we get a mic over there, please?
Hi,
Yes,
I work
yes.
for UNDP. I haven't heard the word gender during the discussion. So, in all the developing countries, many of our work is to remove the gender divide in digital technology. And in a way, to see that if, as a woman, I don't have access to digital technology, I might think that I'm out of threat for AI. But actually, it will, I will face more gap in terms of the threat adaptability. So how do we design the policy for advocacy or other work to, when we, in our attempt to reduce the gender divide in digital space, in this AI age? So how do we proceed when we, do we bring more anxiety to people who don't have digital access now with the information of AI? How do we deal with that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for raising that vital issue. Anyone want to take that? Gender?
I will try.
Laura, go for it.
I will try. I totally agree with your concern. Every data confirms that women is part of the most vulnerable groups when we speak about, in general, digital technologies, but especially concerning artificial intelligence. It is not only about women not having access to these technologies, or at least not in the same, don't have the same possibilities as men have. But it is also that they are also experiencing some of the worst effects of digital technologies. One of very specific examples has to do with political violence against women. The amount of attacks that are registered in social media using artificial intelligence is growing exponentially. So that is a big issue. But also when you look at the labor markets, women are going to be the most hardest hit groups of the population because of this substitution in some labor activities. So I think there are a couple of things that are very important in trying to advance. One is just to start right now in doing something about reducing the bias in some algorithms which are working against female groups. The other thing is trying to attract more women to STEAM in general. We need to design and to implement more campaigns to stimulate women to think about, a future on technology and give them more possibilities to access to these areas. And finally, I think that women empowerment is key to all of these issues we are talking about, because women usually bring a complementary perspective to the table and to the debates. And I think that in general, we have many female groups very sensible about the issues we have been talking about today, but sometimes their voices are not heard because they are not enough empowered. So we will need to continue working in favor of women empowerment.
Yeah, gender equality, women's empowerment is crucial to all aspects of sustainable development. Does anyone else want to add to that, Daniela?
Yes, so one thing that I wanted to mention would also come from the professional angle. We realize that most of the time, about 20 to 25% of developers or AI engineers are women. So if you have just this fraction of women within the space, you know that the technologies that will be built would not necessarily represent our unique challenges and perspective as women. So maybe we can approach it from the educational angle, where we can also increase more STEM awareness for women, young people, so that they can find the AI field as a lucrative area where they want to venture in and also become experts in that. I know in Ghana there's a specific initiative that is being done by a host of stakeholders, even like the GIZ and some other institutions, where they are having specifically AI fellowship focus for women, where they train the young people to basically learn data science, data mining, and engineering, so they can also venture into the space. So if we can address it from that angle, we can be able to also solve those gender-digital divide, especially when it comes to building AI technologies too.
Wanted to add quickly to
Just very quickly, just to say that this issue of gender and AI is nested within a larger issue of the rollback, the danger of a rollback on gender equality in the world right now. So we need to see this in the context of this larger phenomenon, which is a huge risk to the gains of the past few decades.
Lots of hands up. I think we can take maybe one more question.
I already have the mic, sorry.
Oh, you've got the mic already. Sorry, folks. She's beat you to it. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Garima. I'm a student at Columbia University. Firstly, thank you for this discussion. It was really insightful. My question is, I feel that human mobility is an integral part of the human security angle. And with this increasing trend of, sort of securitization of migration by so many government regimes, how do you see the role of AI in this scenario? Will it make it better or worse? What are your thoughts? Thank you.
Anybody? Kezom? You look like you want to say something.
No, I was thinking about UNDP has a huge emphasis on cross-border movements, flow of data, money, and people. Just because border communities are often impoverished and face traditional barriers of exchange of goods and services and movements, human mobility. And so with that focus, I think when we look at AI, for example, in Ghana, one of our pilots programs is around digitizing the Twi language. Twi is spoken predominantly across West Africa. When we digitize, it's not just about the written data, but it's also about voice data. And when you bring that power into AI systems for particularly, say, women, the movement of people and ability to be much more productive and much more empowered is, I think, the theory of change that's within the sort of prioritization and digitization of TUI in the right way. So I'm sure there are multiple ways in which to kind of look at it from a human mobility perspective, but certainly we see that the more it is able to, AI is able to contextualize and create better services, better understanding through voice data and other aspects in local languages, we think human mobility can be much more productive and safe.
Thank you. We're going to take one more quick question. You had your hand up for a while now, so please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll be quick. My name is Tahir Soni. I'm ambassador of Libya to the UN. I'm not here in my capacity as that. I'm an ex-UNDP staff for a very long time. My master's is in AI in 2004. So in that time, 2004, everybody was laughing when I was doing. Actually, I worked on developing an app for predicting human development indexes. Okay. That time, I tried to convince UNDP to take that app. I've been in a different place. Nobody took me seriously. Now I'm in this job. So we'll see if was a good idea. But that being said, thank you very much for the panel. Thanks for your insights. There's just a couple of things. With every wave of technology or something new, there's always the risks and fear and thinking about the future. When internet came out, we had the same fear. We see how it can be misused. We can see the bullying. We can see the financial fraud. We can see criminal networks. And at the same time, of course, there's benefits. The thing that I feel that is troubling, that everybody is looking at AI as a standalone thing, which it's not. AI is just a sophisticated, more advanced programming language that is somehow being independent in a way, but at the end of the day, it's a man-made technology. Until this minute. I mean, it didn't take off as an independent, standalone system where it has its own conscience, but in the end of the day, it is how we feed it and how we get out of it. And that's fundamental, because still the human brain will be the one that has the upper hand as we use it. The challenge that I see is that the division and the inequality between the global north and south is what's going to cause the conflict in the future if this remains and goes on. Because the misuse, it's exactly, I don't know if I'm going to use the right way of comparison, it's like the nuclear power. So those who have nuclear weapons had the upper hand. Okay, and the technology, and then they try to suppress everybody else not to have the nuclear energy. AI will follow the same in a certain point if we don't. So to avoid this future conflict, we have to reduce this gap and bring nations together. And I think it's the responsibility of the global south, not the north. If we, as a global south, in particular those developing countries, don't come together to start from now, to work on being more independent when it comes to data collection, when it comes to producing, and starting to be a producer of this and not just a consumer. You don't blame the global north, because and everybody wants to do the profit and benefit, and this is going to be human nature. So yes, we will welcome the partnership, but it's the responsibility of the global south. Now my question to the panel, in terms of advising governments in this critical time, in terms of putting policies, how would you be able to advise if you have 1, 2, 3 laws you want to introduce internationally and you advised us as member states to be able to regulate the use of AI in a way that you don't interfere also in the freedom of your people in innovation and using this technology, but yet protecting your society from what could be misused in terms of AI? That's a thin line there. Whether it's to do with surveillance, whether it's doing of data interference, all of these things are good. But there is some kind of advice that we need in order to make sure that we give the necessary rights to people to innovate, because there's a wide range of innovation that can happen through AI. Now, individuals who have thoughts in their mind, they don't need to be programmers to implement it. And this is going to be a wide range of investment and good profit for societies, especially those who lacked the ability to advance in technology from before. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's actually a great question to end our panel on. So we'll go with one actionable recommendation that you would give policymakers. I know you got to distill it. Who wants to go first? Johan, go.
I have more than one.
Yes, that's your mic.
Oh, sorry. Just picking up actually what colleagues have been saying, great question. Three things very quickly. Transparency, consent. There's a lot of things that are happening in the world without consent, and consent is going to be important. And let's be honest, maybe I'm talking out of turn. We have drugs that enter that are approved by medicines agencies, drug regulatory agencies in every country, where before a drug goes into a market, it's screened. I think we reached the point with certain types of technology, including AI, where there may need to be some pre-screening by regulators before something is released out onto the market.
Shall we go down the line? Daniela?
Okay, so I would also come from the angle of a dual-use governance, in the sense that we know that for every technology, we could have the positive use and then the negative use. So then maybe we can approach it from creating policies that envision what the negative use could look like, and then we put together policies to address those. And it also falls back to the multi-stakeholder collaboration. So bringing together the innovators into the space, because I feel like for the most part, policymakers make these regulations independent of what an innovator is doing. So we have to have the innovators within the space so that they can also share their own experiences and also share the possible harms or possible outputs or outcomes that could impact our life. So if we have this approach, I think it would help us be able to regulate the space whilst also fostering innovation here.
Laura?
Okay, well, as a policymaker, that will be my recommendation. I will act in two levels. First, at the international level, recognizing that most of the nations in the world doesn't have, again, the capacity or the muscle to confront this huge industry, because this is about, market power. And from the political point of view, we are very weak to confront some of those companies. So first, I will try to strengthen all the responses at the multilateral level, because we need these institutions working in our favor. Secondly, I will convene a conversation at the national level with different sectors. And here I want to be very clear. This is not only about public-private partnership, because I have many doubts about some of those alliances. Here we need to call the civil society to be part of the discussion. That means independent media, that means NGOs, specialized investigation centers, universities working on these issues, so we can really have the different perspectives and the right political balance when we are going to take the decisions.
Kezom.
Gosh, I love the passion.
Thank you.
And always a pleasure to meet the illustrious alumni network of UNDP, Ambassador. UNDP launched a product called the AI Readiness Assessment, and we launched it because we had a number of governments, in particular across developing countries, across the Global South, asking how they should be thinking about this opportunity, how to protect it, how to ensure sovereignty, how to protect the development pathways of AI. So government as a user and government as an enabler, those are the aspects that is covered under this assessment. So I would say that there are some existing tools, certainly to leverage, but ultimately these tools are really engagement tools because the discussion is a whole of society discussion at the country level. Secondly, I think we really need to reimagine trust and safety. And again, last week in San Francisco, when we were having these positive confrontations, we were trying to make a list of 5 things that we think big tech companies, when they come from outside, could be also continental, into specific countries, need to make sure that they make transparent the grievances registered in their trust and safety phone, hotlines. Make sure that data is available to researchers. Make sure that there's a local consultation held annually. I mean, could we just come up with some compacts that can help us kind of understand this opportunity and not stifle it, but also make sure that we put people and our humanity at the center as we learn and evolve in the next couple of years, because this thing is changing every week.
Yeah, Toby.
Yeah, so when I think about questions of AI governance, I try to, I'm sure many of us are thinking about this, as to what needs to be dealt with at the multilateral international level and what can be dealt with by national regulation, allowing different countries to choose, for their own purposes, to meet the needs and desires of their own citizens. And when it comes to the types of things I was talking about with existential risk posed by AI, that really is, nothing is causing an existential risk today. And the issue is maybe in a few years' time that could start to be happening and we're not ready. But if it does happen in a few years' time, it would be from the leading groups. So these frontier labs, which are trying to build these artificial general intelligence systems. Not from the things that are happening with many of the entrepreneurs around the world, either in rich countries or elsewhere. And so I think that when it comes to kind of the need for this multilateral kind of one-size-fits-all regulation, that particularly comes from these harms that really cross national borders and would involve kind of particular constraints upon the people who are at the front, which would actually overall help with this question about equality and to try to remove some of this prisoner's dilemma they find themselves in. Yeah.
We could keep talking, but we do have to wrap up. Thank you all so very much for that enlightening, information-packed conversation. It is time now for a quick break. There's coffee, tea, refreshments over there. Do stay for our second panel that promises to be well worth sticking around for. That begins at 11:35, right? 5 more minutes. I hope to see you then. And if you get a chance, we have a board near the entrance where we'd love you to leave a thought on what human security means to you. Enjoy your break and see you back here.